I'm Troy Dante Presswood, president of the Ward 8 Democrats, and I'm joined here with my friend and colleague Marcus Batchelor, who's the chair of the Membership and Voter Engagement Committee. So let's start with DC Delegate to Congress. Congresswoman Norton, who won the Ward 8 straw poll, by the way, has three challengers running against her: Wendy Hope Dealer Hamilton, Kelly Michael Williams, and actually that's it. Just those two people running against her. What are your thoughts on this race?
Well, it's an interesting race. Obviously, I think Congresswoman Norton is running for her 13th term in Congress, and she still enjoys tremendous popularity. I think she, is rightfully dubbed our warrior on the hill. And so a lot of what she's bringing into this race is about her experience and her seniority, how she can deliver on behalf of DC residents, given her position in Congress, and then also she's, I think, taking the message to folks that we're farther than we've ever been on DC statehood. But I think the two challengers, Wendy Hamilton and Michael Williams, I think I think they bring tremendous energy to the race. I think, Wendy has talked a lot about how you really have an enthusiastic booster for the city in the office of the delegate, and Kelly Michael is bringing, I think, his personal story and experience to this race, and I think that is going to be, I think that's tremendously valuable. And as we look to a new generation of leadership, I'm sure in the next several cycles for that seat, I think that candidates like that really set the stage, really give folks a preview of what the future for DC and Congress could look like.
It's a great point, because Wendy Hamilton, she is a reverend and she's also a social worker. Kelly Michael Williams is an activist for homeless and mental health services, and he's also a former legislative aide to Councilmember Vincent Orange. And as far as Congresswoman Norton, I think this is her 16th term if she wins in not just this upcoming primary, but also in November. U.S. Shadow Rep, it's more like a D.C. Statehood activist role, but the talk about statehood has never been hotter. Now you have Linda Gray, who is the vice chair of the D.C. Democratic Party. She's squaring off against the incumbent, Oye Awolowo, who is going after his second term. And I should also note that he won the straw poll for the Ward 8 Democrats. Your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's a super exciting race, super interesting race, and it actually makes me excited that more people are interested in advocating for the statehood issue. I think the last few cycles we saw a pretty mute contest for that seat. And so to see energy in the race is really exciting. It's also really exciting to see two strong and active Democrats, DC Democrats, east of the river Democrats in this race to take up the statehood mantle. And to your point, the fact that we're closer to statehood than ever before means that this elected activist role, right, this volunteer position, is even more important in really carrying the message of DC residents from the grassroots to the halls of power. So it's going to be an interesting race.
Well, thank you, Marcus, for your insights. And now we want you to see for yourself how these candidates answer the questions from Ward 8 Democratic voters. Feel free to post your comments or live tweet with us, because we're going to be live tweeting as well, even though this is an encore presentation, using the hashtag Ward8Votes. And so on behalf of all of us here at the Ward 8 Democrats, I want to thank you for joining us here. Okay, let's get to the forum, and let me introduce our moderator. James Wright Jr. is no stranger to us here at the Ward 8 Democrats. He is a staff writer for the Washington Informer. He has worked for the Informer since December 2018, after previously working as a freelancer for the newspaper for 5 years. Prior to the Informer, James was a writer and city editor for the Washington Afro-American newspaper, covering Capitol Hill, the White House, and local sports. He also worked at the Washington Post at the sports copy desk in the early 2000s. James has traveled extensively to Africa, the UK, Rome, Libya, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and Ghana as a journalist. And he's interviewed such notables as Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, Vice President Al Gore, South African President Thabo Mbeki, and many African-American leaders, including members of the Congressional Black Caucus, and he resides in the Washington, D.C. area. So without further ado, James, is yours.
First of all, I want to thank you, Troy Presswood, for inviting the Washington Informer to have the chance to moderate this panel. We want to thank you and the executive committee for this. And we definitely want to thank the audience for taking time out of their busy schedules on this beautiful day to hear about the future of our city. And as you alluded to, Troy, the future of our country. I would like to set some ground rules for the debate that will take place. And as Troy said, I will be moderating the DC delegate for the U.S. Congress. I'd like to introduce the panelists, the Reverend Wendy Hamilton. I'd like to introduce our incumbent DC delegate, Eleanor Holmes Norton. And I'd like to introduce a challenger, Kelly McHale Williams. Good afternoon to all three of you.
Good afternoon.
Great. Can we hear everybody? Can we hear everybody?
Can you hear me?
Okay, fantastic. We have everybody. I have a quick question. There is a proposal before the DC Council, a bill by the name of the Delegate Voting Rights Act of 2022. And basically this bill would allow the delegate, go ahead.
Hey, I apologize for interrupting you. So we actually have in our rules, if we could start with the rules of the day, and then also we want to give them each an opening statement.
Okay, that's right. Okay, before I get to the questions, I stand corrected. Opening statements, could you start, Reverend Hamilton?
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Good morning, good afternoon, Ward 8 Democrats and those who are tuning in. I want to thank you so much for offering me the opportunity to speak today about this important role and why I'm running for it. My name is Reverend Wendy Hamilton. I'm an ordained minister, mother, new grandmother, social justice advocate, and a very proud resident of Ward 8. I'm running for Congress, the delegate role to represent the broad voices and diverse interests of residents across all 8 wards of our city. I do believe it's time for representation that has the future of DC in mind and a policy platform that gets us there. A delegate who is present in the community and shows up regularly to connect with constituents, because connected representation empowers voters. I'm especially honored to address Ward 8 residents specifically at this time, given the unique circumstances that face our newly redistricted ward and that are quickly changing things on the ground before our very eyes and raising the concerns of many of our residents who have lived in this community for generations. Their concerns are my concerns, and I look forward to a robust discussion as we talk about tangible solutions for our residents that will help us move beyond the status quo in our city to a new chapter that includes DC statehood, UBI, and so much more. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Hamilton. Next on our list will be DC Delegate. Before I do that, I just want to make sure that we understand the rules of the day. I'll get to you, Delegate Norton. Basically, we want to make sure, again, that the candidates respond to the questions. They have 1 minute. And after the minute, when we get into the debate, if they mention any names, those persons have a right to a 30-second rebuttal. Any other rules that I'm not pertaining to, please let me know. Okay, cool, fantastic. Delegate Norton, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you. At Ward 8 Democrats, I'm asking for your support to continue my work in the House of Representatives, which has brought great dividends to the residents of the District of Columbia. I have twice gotten the House to pass my bill to make the District of Columbia the 51st state for the first time in the district's 200-year history. And I have gotten a hearing on that bill in the Senate. As chair of the Subcommittee on Highways and Transit, I have played a major role in the passage of the new infrastructure law. And I am on tap to chair the full Transportation and Infrastructure Committee next term. I have gotten an increase from $10,000 to $15,000 annually for my tuition access grant bill, that is funding DC students to go to colleges and universities in all 50 states. I have consistently been I have consistently been rated one of the most effective House Democrats based on bills passed by the Center for Effective Lawmaking. I am running for a new term, not based on promises of what I will do, but based on a proven record of bringing DC residents what they need from Congress. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congresswoman Norton. Mr. Williams, you have 1 minute for an opening statement.
Thank you so much, James. Hello, Ward 8 Democrats. My name is Kelly Michael Williams, and I just want to thank the Ward 8 Democrats for hosting this forum today. I'm a single father. I'm a homeless survivor. I'm a caregiver for my mother who suffers from Alzheimer's and dementia. And as a representative for the Ward 8 residents, I will focus on the rising crime that we're experiencing, unemployment, the lack of affordable housing in the ward. In addition, I'll work to promote workforce development, entrepreneurship, and minority business enterprises. Professionally, across the city and across my career, I've had the privilege of working at every level of government. I've served as Director of Constituent Services for former at-large council member Vincent Orange. Prior to that, I was in the Clinton administration, where I received 3 political appointments, and the final one serving as the administrative officer for the Farm Credit Administration. Currently, I have the pleasure of serving on the board of DC's only full-service youth and young adult homeless center, which is Covenant House, which is located right there in Ward 8. On Mississippi Avenue, where I've advocated for homeless youth and young adults and assisted them to continue their educational pursuits, as well as obtaining housing and finding employment through workforce development, through our Workforce Development Center. As your representative, I will continue to work to do those things and to make sure that Ward 8 becomes the jewel that it has always been, and using the access to federal dollars to bring additional resources to our community. So I thank you for this opportunity, and I look forward to this robust discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Williams. And being a reporter, you get so excited when you have people of the caliber that we have here. You want to forget that they have statements and you just want to get right to the questions. So we're going to get right to the questions right now. The question that I have is to do with, as I said before previously, the Delegate Voting Rights Act of 2022, which is before the DC Council. It is being co-sponsored by the chairman of the council, who we'll hear from later, and Council Member Mary Che of Ward 3. In a nutshell, this bill would allow the delegate from the district to vote on the House floor, finally, in the final vote on the House floor on matters exclusively to the district. And the district can do this because of the Home Rule Charter, but before the Home Rule Charter, the DC delegate bill, which was passed in 1970. Both of those work in concert in order for this action to take place. I would like to know, do you support this particular piece of legislation? I'll just start over again with the way we're going for, and I'm doing this for a reason. Reverend Hamilton, how do you feel about this council bill?
Thank you. I feel like it is progress. It would be moving forward, but I still don't believe that it is enough. I think that we can go for the entire statehood legislation that, as Delegate Norton mentioned, she's passed in the House and we're waiting to get through the Senate. I think that having a vote exclusively for DC voters can be helpful, but I also think that if we do that, that's almost like settling, and then they will not be willing to continue to talk about the full statehood vote because they'll feel like they're giving us something that we should just settle for that. So for me, I support it, but I think that we can go beyond that, and I would not do that in lieu of continuing to pursue full statehood.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hamilton. Congresswoman Norton, your perception of this?
Well, I agree with Reverend Hamilton. This is not even half a loaf, but it is an expression of the council's frustration that we have not yet become the 51st state. So they want whatever they can get, and getting that vote on DC matters only, they see as progress. So I wouldn't oppose it, but I certainly believe that it is an indication to the Congress of the frustration of those who represent the district that our bill has not yet passed. Now, the bill has made great progress in the House with passage twice and a hearing in the Senate. So we are getting somewhere, and I accept fully the frustration that residents express about wanting to have at least something. That's not quite enough.
All right, thank you, Congresswoman. Mr. Williams, do I need to repeat the question, or do you understand the gist of it?
No, I understand the gist. Thanks, James. I agree with Reverend Wendy and Delegate Norton, because I would not want to accept the legislation as end all to be all. We can accept it as, progress and move forward, but certainly we are not going to stop advocating for the full right to vote and our full vote in the House and in the Senate eventually. I think it's something that we can move forward on and take as progress, because certainly we've been blocked trying to get everything all at once, but certainly we can move and take pieces and move forward with it. So I would agree with it, but certainly not make it the end all to be all.
Thank you very much for your responses. Really, that was my only question in terms of being a moderator, but we have plenty of questions in terms of the people in the audience, and we're going to get right to those. As the delegate, what issues will you work on for DC residents directly? This time we will start with the Congresswoman in the next session.
Well, in addition to statehood for the District of Columbia, I will be working particularly on affordable housing in the District of Columbia, which is a major problem here. I have bills, and I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that Democrats are in the majority to get affordable housing. I'll be working on expansion of Medicare. I'm trying to take advantage of the fact that Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the presidency. So I will be working on all of the bills that affect the District of Columbia, because I am not sure that we can keep control of the House and the Senate next session.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Norton. Mr. Williams, what will you do as the delegate to the United States Congress, the House, to affect issues with DC residents?
One of the first things I want to focus on is of course, tent cities and homelessness. Being homeless myself with my son when he was 3, seeing the tent cities brings back the memories of understanding exactly what people are going through. So one of the things I want to first do is deal with that, and some of the federal programs that we have, the continuum care and as well as the emergency solutions grant are some of the things that I want to focus on trying to obtain to make sure we can get those dollars to be able to address the issues of homelessness as well as crime. I want to deal with crime because we also understand that in our community, crime is rising and across the city is rising, and being able to get jobs for folks, which is the third thing that I want to focus on, will help them reduce crime and also help them in their housing situation. So those are the 3 major issues that I want to focus on: vocational training, entrepreneurship, because I believe also if we get those our young people into their own businesses and creating their own businesses, then we don't have to look for jobs. We can create jobs, and that will also sustain them where they're not going to be out on the street engaged in criminal activity, but they're also going to be able to sustain themselves in their housing.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Reverend Hamilton, please respond.
Yes, sir. So I would definitely continue the fight for statehood, because that's going to be an ongoing fight. We've even got to get some Democrats that are not on par with us and not on board. We have to get them on board, as well as taking it to the Senate. So I've continued the statehood fight. But as I've been out here on the campaign trail talking to residents for the last 15 months, folks also need some money. We've been through a lot in these last few years with the pandemic, and things were tight before then. So I'm a big proponent of universal basic income, and that would be a piece of legislation that I would introduce in my first 51 days as delegate to DC. That's the $1,000 a month recurring payment to help us recover from what we've been through. If you remember the child tax credits that just came through, it was able to lift almost 50% of students out of poverty, children out of poverty. East of the River Thrive just did an example basic income pilot in Ward 8, and the data shows UBI works, $1,000 a month, recurring payments to all DC residents, regardless of income. That's what I'd introduce to help DC.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hamilton. Now we'll start this round with Mr. Williams. Mr. Williams, the RFK site, as you know, is in federal hands, and there are moves in order to move it to the city and possibly get the Washington Commanders to come back to the city. What are your thoughts about this? And as a delegate, our representative in Congress, what would you do to facilitate this process?
I think it would be exciting if we could take that piece of land and build a new stadium or they could build their own stadium for their return and bring back an excitement around the city when they were here before as the Redskins and be able to develop it. I think if that happens and development occurs, that we have to make sure the development spreads across the spectrum where minority businesses and other small businesses are part of that growth and part of the pie that's going to be distributed from that development operation. Because what I've seen and what I've learned from my time with Councilman Orange and others is that minority businesses get left out of the cut of the pie when this happens. From the construction to all the other subcontractors, they do not get their fair share of the goods that come in. So one of the things that I would do to facilitate that is making sure that everyone has an opportunity, especially our small Black minority businesses, to get in there to be able to collect from the resources that are going to be developed, because that development will be $1 billion development. And when the results are done, we want to make sure that our community and our small businesses, our small minority businesses, are a part of that and be able to get it. Because if they are not, they're going to be left out just like they are right now.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Reverend Hamilton, the question about the RFK site and possibly the Commanders coming back to DC.
Thank you. I think that the different thoughts that are going around about what to do with that site are all valid. I think that bringing the Commanders back is certainly, an attractive option. But I also just think it's very important that the residents of that area get included in the conversations about what's going to happen with that site. Because oftentimes leadership, government make decisions without getting feedback from the community on what the community wants. So I want to see that land given back to DC. That is federal land, so we would have a say-so in that. So give that back to DC. But I also like that there's an idea on the table to turn RFK into a world-class indoor sports and training and athletic facility as well. We definitely want to develop some housing there, so I don't want to leave that out. I want it to be a multi-use facility, but I also work in DC public schools. In my day job, I work in a middle school over in Ward 5 at Brooklyn, and I know our kids are looking for opportunities to do something, other than play games, believe it or not. And we don't have a world-class facility like that, so I would love to see those ideas taken into consideration as well, because we need that.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hamilton. Congresswoman Norton, this is an issue that you are familiar with, and now we're throwing a monkey wrench in terms of the Washington Commanders. They're the Commanders now. Could you talk about what you want to do or plan to do in terms of the RFK site?
Well, James, you're really talking about my bill, the bill that would allow the district to buy. Remember, they would have to buy, and they're willing to pay for that land. It is up to the district to decide what should be used of that land, not the Congress of the United States. Our role is only to get that land to the District of Columbia. The council and the mayor are divided on what use to be made of it. So when my friends here talk about the uses they want to be made of it, they are really talking about something that is not within the congressional jurisdiction. The use to be made of it is the use that the District of Columbia makes of it. Now, the commander's issue is a problem. The fact is that there are 3 jurisdictions competing for the team, and they are trying to outbid one another, and the district has not decided to bid that kind of money. My job and the job of the delegate is simply to get the land in the hands of the district.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Norton. This is an interesting question that many of us who follow statehood want to ask, and it's sort of an academic question. So I'm going to start this round with Reverend Hamilton. Reverend Hamilton, what do you think about legislation, I should say, exempting DC residents from federal income tax? Could you please respond to that?
Can I just, before I respond to that one real quickly, can I just say on that previous question about the RFK situation? Well, I know what
certainly 30 seconds.
I know what the technical, ramifications are, and that it is a DC and the council decision, but we're representatives of the people. And I think our voice and how we feel and talking to our residents and getting to know what they want, us weighing in on that, I think is important as well. I don't think we have to have this hands-off approach between the Hill and what's going on in DC. I think if you're providing that connected representation, it is okay to take a position and listen to the people and put your opinions out there on how you think that should be used. I think that's part of the role.
Thank you, Reverend Hamilton.
That being said, your question was about being exempt.
Yes, go ahead.
From federal income tax?
Yes.
Correct? Okay, well, that would be, a lot of people would like to have that happen. I don't think that that's possible to do. I know that it is a popular idea, but I don't think at the end of the day that it would be economically viable, a viable decision for the District of Columbia to opt out of that, particularly as we move towards statehood. Those are the type of, taxes that will also help to fund things that we want to keep in place when we do become a state. So I don't think that opting out of them would be the most economically wise decision to do, although I know it's a very popular one.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hamilton. Delegate Norton, your thoughts on this?
My thoughts on what?
On legislation exempting DC residents from paying federal income taxes because,
Actually, I've tried that once in the Congress. I was so frustrated that the district is number 1 per capita, first per capita paying income tax. So I tried that, but frankly, the district wants to pay its fair share and get what it's due. And that's the position that you will find the mayor and the city council making over and over again. They're not asking to be exempt from federal income taxes. They're only asking to get for their federal income taxes what every other resident of every other state gets.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Norton. Mr. Williams, your thoughts on exempting district residents from paying federal income taxes?
I like the idea. It sounds wonderful. It sounds great. And certainly if we could do it and still have the resources that we need to function, I would go for it. It would be all good. But unfortunately, I agree with Reverend Wendy and Delegate Norton that unfortunately the idea is great and it's aspirational, but it would not remedy the issue that we have, which is certainly wanting our vote and doing what we need to do, because those dollars are needed for our function of our government. So having it would cause a great deal of harm to those who would want to keep having the resources that we have in the district.
We're now going to make a slight change because I'm going to ask you all direct questions. Because these are direct questions, I would ask you keep your responses to 30 seconds. And again, the rebuttal rule applies. If you mention somebody else's name, they get a 30-second rebuttal. Let's start with Reverend Hamilton. You talked about universal basic income. We've gotten questions about how would that work in terms of not busting the budget. 30 seconds, please.
Well, we would find the money to pay for it. The same way we bail out banks, we can bail out our people. And we would start by using and looking at avenues of a value-added tax, a VAT tax. Many people don't realize that Google, Amazon, large companies like that, you know how many taxes they paid last year? 0. UBI is capitalism that doesn't start at 0. We have the money to do it. You saw how quickly stimulus payments came out. You saw how quickly we were able to agree on child tax credits. We have the money to fund the UBI. We just need the political will and courage.
Thank you very much. Congresswoman Norton, we have a question about the state of the Congress Heights post office and the state of the Shepherd Park. They want to know, what have you done in order to improve those two institutions, if I could call them that? 30 seconds, please.
We've had complaints about postal delivery from those sections and frankly, all over the District of Columbia. And I have been daily working with the post office on these issues, just gotten a bill passed through the Congress on giving the post office more money so we can finally service our people as they deserve.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Norton. Mr. Williams, as a member of Congress, what will you do in order to curtail or even eliminate sex trafficking, and in terms of juvenile restorative services, improve, at least on the federal level, in terms of that?
That's a good question. Some of the work that we do at Covenant House is dealing exactly with that, because right now in the district, 93% of the youth and young adults who are out on the street, they're first out on the street, they are either propositioned into sex trafficking or they end up in sex trafficking. And one of the things that we've tried to do is create a safe haven for those individuals so that they can come into our facilities and be able to get themselves off the street, essentially. So one of the things I would do is certainly introducing legislation that will address that issue specifically, but more importantly, make sure that we have the facilities available so that those who are out on the street, those who are homeless, those who find themselves displaced, have a place to go and have an understanding that that's where they can go so they will not get into that situation.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Got an interesting question in terms of UDC, and this is a 30-second question, but because this is directed really to Congresswoman Norton, and I'll ask the others to respond. The Office of Management and Budget has a list of institutions that are training institutions. The University of District of Columbia is not one of them. This person wants to know, what are your efforts to have UDC include in the OMB training list?
I'm trying to get the equality for the District of Columbia in all federal matters, including in training. And with Democrats in power, I think I have an opportunity and a chance to do that.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams, your thoughts on this?
I really want UDC to be the flagship that it should be. So I would encourage not only having vocational training and other training there, but also bringing back the 28 degree programs that was taken away back in 2012, I believe it was, to reinstitute those educational programs to create opportunities for folks at UDC. UDC should be much more robust and bigger than it really is, in my opinion. And I would want to do everything possible to make sure that we do that, from training to educational and bringing back those degree programs.
And Reverend Hamilton?
I agree with both Delegate Norton and Mr. Williams that I would certainly support UDC being added to that list as a training facility, a world-class training. We already have a wonderful workforce development there at UDC. I'd love to see that expanded and actually even brought back to the high school level. That's part of my education platform. Is I want to see vocational and trade training brought back. All of our kids aren't going to go to college, and that's okay, but they have cultivatable skills, and we need to be able to develop those out. And so I'd love to see, mechanics and plumbing and technician, because Congressman Jim Clyburn says every doctor is going to need a plumber, and every lawyer is going to need a mechanic one day. So I'd love to support that.
Thank you very much. That was a very interesting question. I just had to get that one in. This is more of a theoretical question, and so these are fun. And as a result of that, I'm going to expand it from 30 seconds to 1 minute, given the fact that we do have time. Mr. Williams, Ward 8 has expanded. It's now west of the river in the wonderful Navy Yard area. Now, the question I have is that what are you going to do as a member of Congress to see that Martin Luther King Avenue is upgraded at, let's say, at a level of the Navy Yard? 1 minute, sir.
Well, certainly being able to have transportation dollars to be able to expand that in terms of infrastructure dollars, and I would like to see Martin Luther King Avenue similar to other avenues in this district, where we have it lined with businesses, robust, there's jobs, there's activities, there's a lot of community walking up and down the street. We need to be able to put the infrastructure and the facades up, make it look, more beautiful, make it historical in its nature, because it is Ward 8, it is Martin Luther King Avenue. I would like to see the historical aspect of it, the cobblestone. We would make it and push forward through legislation and bring in federal dollars into the city for that. That's exactly how I would handle that.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Reverend Hamilton, same question.
I think it's an important question, because there are a lot of residents who don't even realize that we have been redistricted. They don't understand the implications. As I'm talking to people, they're saying, I mentioned something about Navy Yard being in Ward 8 online, and they said, that's Ward 6. Not anymore. That's Ward 8. And so we want to make sure that all of the investments that they have put into Ward 6 make it east of the river. What we're not going to have is a upper Ward 8 and a lower Ward 8. Definitely that's not on my watch. So we're going to make sure that the equity is there, that they're not being left behind, but that also has to do with us as residents bringing our voices to the table and holding developers that are making plans in wards, holding them accountable as well. So it's going to take a group effort. It's not going to just be the leadership that can direct that. So we can do our part federally to get money, but I need my residents over on Martin Luther King and Morris Road and all that to be holding folks accountable if you see changes being made west of the river in Ward 8 that aren't happening east of the river in Ward 8, where I live.
Thank you, Reverend Hamilton. Congresswoman Norton, basically, what can you do as a member of the House to elevate the level of Martin Luther King Avenue to the level of Navy Yard?
Well, it's not only what can I do, it's what am I doing now. I was chair of the Surface Transportation Subcommittee. We have just gotten out a bill that will do exactly what you indicated. We'll take MLK if the city chooses to use the money in that way, because this is a home rule issue, and I'm almost sure they will. To expand Martin Luther King Avenue to deal with what needs to be done to make that avenue the street it should be, the kind of Fifth Avenue of Ward 8. And I think that my work in the Transportation and Infrastructure Subcommittee has already made that possible for the district as I speak.
Thank you very much. I want to ask this one as a quickie, and because it's a quickie, it's 30 seconds of each candidate. And I will start with the Congresswoman. Do you support the death penalty federally and for DC?
I am very much against the death penalty, always have been, and have done all I could and when the matter has come before the Congress, and that's the federal death penalty, to oppose it.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Reverend Hamilton?
Ditto. I am against the death penalty in all of its forms.
Thank you very much. Mr. Williams?
Absolutely, I'm against the death penalty.
Thank you very much. We're not at closing statements yet, but I am curious about this question, and this really focuses on Hamilton and Williams. I'll start with Reverend Hamilton on this. What makes you better than the incumbent?
Thank you for that. And I've gotten that question before, and what I would like to say to people is it's not about being better, it's about being different. I think that I bring a different skill set. I think I bring a different approach and a different vision. I have all due respect for Delegate Norton, and I say that all the time. I'm not running against Delegate Norton. I'm running for DC. I'm running for the city to give us options. I believe democracy calls for that, but also to approach this from a more human-centered position, which I'm a minister by training. I'm a people-oriented person, and I believe in connected representation and leadership. What you see of me as an individual, you will see of me as a representative. And I think that it's important to be out, to be in the community, to be able to be held accountable by those folks who have put me in office. Because if I'm not doing what they need me to do, I need them to remember that they can vote me out. I like to say, people will say, are you running for Eleanor's seat? And I'll say, with all due respect, that's the people's seat. No matter how long someone's been in, that belongs to the people, that belongs to you. You get to make those decisions on who occupies that seat. And so, like I said, I'm bringing a different skill set, and that's what I'm asking voters to consider in this election.
Thank you very much, Reverend Hamilton. Mr. Williams, your response.
I have the same response to a certain extent, is that I don't believe that either of us are we're not out to attack or take down Ms. Norton. We respect her and we appreciate all that she's done. She's actually laid the ground floor for us for the legacy that we can then step up on top of and continue to do what she has already accomplished. But we have a different mindset about how we should do it today compared to the way that she has approached it. I think that, like Reverend Wendy, we have a different approach of how we want to do some things now. Now technology has come around, advanced. There are other ways that we can do the same thing. As my dad used to say, there's always a different way that you can skin that cat. So there's always a different way for us to be able to address the issues that we need to address and do so in a more robust fashion, or in other ways, in other avenues. Homelessness, crime, jobs, there's other ways for us to address those issues, even statehood. All those things are there for us to approach. But as time changes, the people must change with the times, and we must be able to move forward. There's no disrespect at all, but it's time for us to have the courage to change course. Because if we don't have the courage to change course, we will always stay in the same place. And when we stay in the same place, we miss out on opportunities. And unfortunately, in our community, we miss out on a lot of opportunities because we're not willing to always take a chance on new ideas and new opportunities. There's a new internet coming, right, that many people don't know about. There's new opportunities and new avenues that are coming that we need to be available for and take advantage of. And that's what we wanted to do.
We're winding down in time. I'm going to ask for the Congresswoman's response, and then I have a question from a very important person in the Ward 8 Dems, which will be, I believe, our last question. So, Congresswoman Norton, what is your response to, in terms of what Reverend Hamilton and Mr. Williams have said? You're on mute. Unmute yourself. Yeah, unmute yourself.
I'm sorry, what is my response to what?
Response to the incumbent, you're the incumbent, and how they are better than, your challengers said that how they are better than you, the incumbent. What is your response to that?
I think that my two competitors, instead of attacking me or one another, have indicated why they would and how they would approach this office. And I do think they have the right approach. The question is, for each of us, is what would you do? And I think their responses have been on point. I have indicated not only what I would do, but what I have done, and that is the best evidence for what you would do, the success you've already had in representing the District of Columbia.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. We have one more question, and I believe we're doing well on time. So, and this is a question from a very important person. So therefore, I'm going to give a minute for each candidate to respond. During the past 2 decades, efforts in juvenile justice have focused on reducing the use of detention and secure confinement, improving conditions of confinement, closing large institutions, and reinvesting in community-based programming, providing high-quality evidence-based services for youth in the juvenile system. What new changes have been made? And I'm assuming this question is on the federal level in terms of improving juvenile justice, in terms of the days when we locked juveniles up. And now where are we going in terms of rehabilitation and improving juvenile justice?
Well,
yes, ma'am, please start.
In all due respect, that's a home rule question. The federal government does not have to do with how juveniles in a local jurisdiction are treated. The district has adopted some very progressive ways to deal with juvenile justice, but that is not in my congressional jurisdiction.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Reverend Hamilton, would you like to respond?
Well, again, while it's not in our federal jurisdiction, I think it's important for us to have an awareness of what our juvenile justice system is doing in the district and how our students are responding to it. As I mentioned, I work as an attendance and truancy counselor. That's my day job, Brooklyn Middle School in Ward 5. And I get the opportunity to help families overcome obstacles that prevent their students from coming to school. But you know what? Some of those kids do find themselves in the juvenile justice system and having to navigate that. So I think as delegate, it also is important for me to know what my families are going through and what they have need of, so that when it comes time to make recommendations from a federal, funding perspective, I have the voice of the needs of the district in mind, so that I can bring that to the table. And working with the students and working directly with the families has informed me in a way that a lot of people don't get the opportunity to have. When you work in DC public schools, we get kids from all 8 wards. So I've had an opportunity and a vantage point in the city to work with folks and understand the needs of those families that many people who live here have not gotten, and I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you, Reverend Hamilton. Mr. Williams?
It's something that we've had to deal with at Covenant House in some cases, because of their situations of being displaced or being out on the street. A lot of times they've gotten into situations or circumstances. So I agree with Reverend Wendy. Whether it's our constitutional and mandated responsibility or not, because we're representing every citizen in the District of Columbia, from birth to death, the juveniles, especially the juveniles, are probably should be one of our greatest concerns, because they are not only our future, but they are the ones who are in between right now. They're the highest unemployed. They're the ones that have one of the greatest homeless issues and job issue and educationally. So we need to focus on them and help them. So from a juvenile justice perspective, the justice needs to be that they have the education that they need, the value system that they need, the opportunities that they need, so they can flourish and dream. Our children aren't dreaming any longer. They're just getting by because of the trauma that they've had to deal with. They've had to deal with so much trauma throughout growing up just in our ward alone that it is hard for them to get out of it. So the juvenile justice issue is an issue that we are still going to have to represent, whether it's home rule or not. We need to address it.
Troy.
Yes. Let me just ask the president, how much time do we have for this segment?
1 minute.
Hey, you have 5 more minutes left.
5 more minutes. Okay. I have another question, and this question is from a very important person. But of all people in Ward 8 are very, very important people. How can we get equitable funding and treatment of National Park Service parks located east of the river? Now, it seems like National Park Service parks located downtown and in Northwest are maintained much better than those in Ward 7 and Ward 8. Let me start with Mr. Williams on this.
Go get it. That's how we do it. We get up there and we go get it. We have to make sure that they understand that we are no less than, we are more than, and we are we have to go out there and acquire those dollars, acquire the respect from the National Park Service to do what they're supposed to do for all of our parks. They don't just do it west of the river, they have to do it east of the river too, and make sure that they do it. It's a matter of going out and making sure that you are present and that you make yourself known the issues that you want to have addressed. I laughed when I would hear Vincent Orange say the squeaky wheel gets the oil. But the point is that we have to get out there and make sure that we are respected for our ward, not because now we have a piece of Ward 6 with us, but because we have always and should have always been respected and get the just due that we deserve, the dollars that we deserve, the investment that we deserve, the infrastructure that we deserve. All of those things need to be happening. And those are the things that I will fight for wholeheartedly each and every day. My life experiences are what led me to come out here and run for this race. And my life experiences are the same life experiences that everyone in our ward has experienced. And if they haven't experienced, they know someone who has. So that's what I will do. I'll make sure that our parks, our transportation, our schools, our infrastructure is valued and looks just as well as Navy Yard or any other yard on the other side of the river.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Congresswoman Norton.
We are very fortunate in the district to have many National Park Service parks right here. The upkeep is in the jurisdiction of the Park Service. I spend a great deal of my time trying to get individual parks in various wards updated and dealt with. They do one thing right. They do clear the parks and keep them clean. But parks in the district, because we are so fortunate to have so many of them, and because they are in my federal jurisdiction, give me the opportunity to work in various wards to get our parks updated so that our residents can make maximum use of these beautiful parks in all 8 wards.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Reverend Hamilton.
Thank you. I also believe that we have, beautiful parks and access to wonderful resources, but I don't think that National Park Service is being held accountable enough. And I think that, like Mr. Williams said, they need to be called on the carpet for what they're doing. If you look at some of our parks, particularly in Ward 7 and in Ward 8, they have fallen in disrepair. And as delegate, that falls under my role. It would fall under my jurisdiction to talk about them. Delegate Norton said that they, are working to clear parks, but they're also clearing homeless encampments very violently. They've got one scheduled for May the 1st. And we need to be in communication with them about some of these decisions that they're making. So that is why, as delegate, I would establish a National Park Service community liaison, someone who is directly in the city, who can communicate with National Park Service. This is in my First 51 plan. If you take a look at my website, Rev. Wendy for Congress First 51, I've come up with several steps that I would take in my first 51 days as delegate, and talking with National Park Service and establishing a community liaison who is responsive to the concerns, and a review board that includes local advocates to address issues and concerns like transportation and park conditions. It's enough to talk about it. We have to be about it. We have to take action, and that's what I would do. They are not taking care of Ward 7 and Ward 8 parks, and they must be held accountable.
Okay, we are coming very, very short on time. And I have a quick question. This is particularly for Mr. Williams and Reverend Hamilton. And Congresswoman Norton, you can respond to this if you wish. Let us say Williams and Hamilton, you do become the delegate, but you have to face a majority Republican Congress. In 30 seconds, how are you going to be effective in a body like that? Let me start with, again, let me go back to Reverend Hamilton and then Mr. Williams.
I would like to say that you have to find common ground. We're not as divided as we think we are. We have more in common than we think. So I would endeavor to build relationships. That's what I do as a minister. I know how to bring sides together to have conversation and talk. And as a matter of fact, at the beginning of my campaign, as I was researching and talking about statehood and how I was going to put my policy together, I found a Republican in DC, though they actually exist, and he was a Republican for statehood. And I reached out to him because I think that, statehood is a human rights issue. It's a nonpartisan issue. It transcends ideology. And I think that we need to talk about it, in that view. So I reached out to Mr. Bakesha, who's the GOP for statehood. We talked about where we could find common ground on the statehood conversation. And he and I published a bipartisan op-ed in support of statehood. So I'm already demonstrating that I'm willing to reach across the aisle if and when necessary to get results for DC. And that's what I would continue to do in Congress.
Thank you, Reverend Hamilton. Mr. Williams.
Likewise, I think the biggest thing is being able to find solutions to problems and solutions to certain issues, which is what our responsibility is finding solutions to the things that are affecting the people that we're representing. I too have a number of friends who are Republican, Black Republicans, in fact, that I've reach out to and talk to, used to have them on my talk show quite often. And we can talk about issues. We may not agree on everything, but we can find some common ground to agree on to do things. Homelessness, jobs, and crime are issues that are affecting the nation. So it's not just a DC issue. They have this in their community and their state as well. So I'm sure by introducing a bill that's going to address homelessness, I can find some common ground and get Republicans to vote on it. I'm sure crime is an issue across the country. They will vote on that as well as jobs. In fact, Republicans have talked about trying to take away our home rule because of our homelessness and our crime in our city. And they want to try to, put that carrot out there and try to bully us. So these are issues that finding common ground on that are affecting not only just DC residents, but across the country that we can introduce legislation for, we can get their buy-in for. Even when the Trump era is out there, you can still be able to find some ways to do that. They did it with the infrastructure bill. They did it with COVID. They'll do it with crime and homelessness and jobs as well.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to be able to answer that question too, because
yes, ma'am.
For most of my time in fact, for virtually all my time in the Congress, Republicans have been in charge, and yet I've been able to get things done for the District of Columbia. You cannot depend upon your party being in charge to get things done. To be sure, this session I was able to get statehood through because we had a Democratic Congress, but I got the DC tag through, the tuition access grants through, a Republican Congress. So to be a Democrat representing the District of Columbia, you have got to be able to find your way through to Republicans who will support you on issues that take strategy, that takes understanding of the district, and that takes understanding of the Congress.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman. Mr. Presswood, how are we looking on time?
Closing statements, please.
Okay, 30 seconds.
They can have a minute.
A minute, okay, thank you, sir. We are having closing statements. Let me start with Mr. Williams.
Thank you, James. I appreciate you moderating this forum. And Mr. Presswood, I appreciate you and the Ward 8 Democrats for hosting it. I want to thank everyone, those of you who participated and listened in and watched and asked your questions. Thank you so much for this opportunity, for allowing me just to share a few of my ideas and what I do. We have a real opportunity to ignite change in our communities. And the question you have before you is, when do you want it? If not now, when? And if you can afford to wait, how long? I'm a fresh voice, I'm a new voice, and I have a heart and passion to usher in a new generation of thinking. The primary issue I want to address, I've lived. The things that I have talked about, from homelessness with my 3-year-old son to being unemployed for an extended period of time, and crime, are things that I've lived and experienced. And the people that you want addressing the issues that are most important to our community are people who have lived experiences. We all understand that when you have lived something and dealt with it, those are the times that you're able to navigate and find new solutions and new opportunities to address those issues. I'm confident that I can be the change that you want to see, because I feel that I'm the change that I want to see. Ward 8, we can't keep doing the same things over and over again, expecting different results. It's time that we have the courage to change course. And I'm asking you to support me on June 21st and vote for Kelly Michael Williams, because I will be the change that you want to see. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you for having me this afternoon and taking the time to deal with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. And in the reverses of the time, Congresswoman Norton, your closing remarks.
I believe that the vote is so important that it should be evidence-based. It is very easy to say what you are going to do, what you want to do, and what you want to be. But voting should be based on what you believe, based on evidence that a candidate can do. So I have not asked people to vote for me for any reason except what I have done. And the vote is so important that you can't afford to vote for someone hoping that he or she will do what they say they want to do. The best way to assure that you get a representative who can produce for you is to look not at promises, but at the record. That is why I'm running on my record as the Congresswoman for the District of Columbia, not on promises for what I will do, but on the evidence that I have produced on what I have done during this term, and even when I was in the minority for my beloved hometown where I was born, the District of Columbia.
Thank you, Congresswoman. And Reverend Hamilton, your closing statement.
Thank you so much. I appreciate everyone for your attendance today. We've covered a lot of ground in discussing what issues are pertinent to Ward 8 and to DC voters. And while I know we barely scratched the surface and don't have all the answers today, my hope is to continue these discussions as your new delegate, as we work together to figure out the best way forward for DC. My inspiration for running for this role comes from my faith in God, my experience as a servant leader, and my deep love for DC. Over these past 15 months on the campaign trail, that decision has only been reinforced by the thousands of conversations that I've had with residents all over this city who want to see us thrive and succeed together. I'm not a politician, and I believe that's a good thing. I'm not just running to represent you. I am you, and we be doing this thing together. That's the type of representation I want to provide the whole city. We've got an opportunity in this election to finally embark on a new chapter with respect for what has come before. This new chapter for Washington, D.C. politics and the city as a whole would be wonderful. All I need to be given is a chance. I'm Reverend Wendy Hamilton, a two-time Howard University graduate, and an even prouder Ward 8 DC resident. And I'm running for Congress because I believe DC deserves options on the ballot. I'm running for DC's future, and I'm asking for your vote on June the 21st. DC, it is time. It's time for a new voice, new vision, and new possibilities. I'm ready. We're ready. All I need is your vote on June 21st. We can do this. It's time. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Hamilton, as well as Congresswoman Norton and Mr. Williams. And that concludes the DC Delegate Candidates Forum. Thank you for your attention. Back to Troy.
All right. We will start with a 1-minute round opening statement, and we will begin with Linda Gray.
Good afternoon, Ward 8 Democrats. I am Linda Gray, and I am running to be the U.S. representative for Washington, D.C. I am a former biology teacher and now a retired principal of GCPS. I am a lifelong resident of the District of Columbia and have been active in D.C. my entire adult life. I reside in Ward 4. I've been a member of the State Committee for 12 years as an add-on, representing the Federation of Democratic Women, and as a Ward 4 committee woman. I'm also a member of the DNC, serving on the Black and the Women's Caucuses. I work with the National Voter Protection Committee, and I currently serve as the Vice Chair of the DC Democratic Party. I am a statehood supporter, a statehood activist, and it is my pleasure to be with you, and thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Oye Awolowo, you're next.
All right. It's so great to be back home in Ward 8. My name is Dr. Oye Awolowo, and I have the honor of serving as your current U.S. representative. And with your previous support and partnership, we've been able to raise the mantle as we fight for DC statehood. Not only have we appeared in dozens of international and national publications talking about statehood, we've also reached across the aisle and talk to those who vote like us and don't vote like us to support DC statehood, which culminated in us introducing a DC statehood resolution through West Virginia's House of Delegates. But beyond that, I'm also honored to be still serving as a servant leader in Ward 8. Being the only at-large elected Ward 8 resident, I've been able to channel the focus back over here. We've been able to increase vaccinations at Ward 8, increase opportunities for vaccines when there was a shortage, and we most recently cleaned up Shepherd's Park, which was left as a blight in our Ward 8 community. Thank you again for supporting me, and hope for you to support again.
Thank you. Let's get to some questions, shall we? And by the way, if you are watching on our live stream, you can send your questions using the hashtag Ward8Votes, and we'll try to pull some of those live as we are conducting this forum for all three forums, but in particular this one as well. So if you have questions for our U.S. representative candidates, you can use the hashtag Ward8Votes and we'll see it. Let's get to some questions that's been submitted in advance. Oh, one other housekeeping matter. If you have a question in this room for any of our candidates, if you will see one of our volunteers, they will give you an index card, and you can then write your question on that card, and they will hand that up to me as well. Barbara, raise your hand so people can see you. Okay, she's in the back at the registration desk. And so if you have a question here that you want to you want heard or answered, you can do that as well. All right, so here are the questions that were submitted in advance. First one, other than statehood, what would be your focus and why? Let's start with you, Mr. Awolowo.
That's a great question. So many aspects of our lives in DC is affected by our lack of statehood, whether it's our healthcare, whether it's our education, whether it's just our lawmaking ability, our control over our lands. So that's why we've been able to increase the level of our work here. I vaccinated over 5,000 district residents since the beginning of the pandemic. We've also addressed student issues like student debt. I was proud to co-write a statement with the DC Young Democrats to really address opportunities to eliminate our student debt crisis. We're also taking care of our streets. Being a Ward 8 resident, I'm able to walk the same streets that you all walk, be next to the same schools you see, be next to the same blighted areas like Shepherd's Park, and we all address these issues because it's really environmental justice, and it's our opportunity to have a say on the things that happen in our communities.
Thank you. Same question for you, Ms. Gray.
Well, first of all, the role of the U.S. representative is solely to push statehood. And under that umbrella, there are certain topics and many topics that you're going to discuss. Health is going to be one of them. The health inequities that we have this side of the river, housing inequities, food deficits. It all comes from having a lack of statehood. But most importantly right now, which is being threatened, while we continue to push for statehood, I'd like to make sure we do what we need to do to protect home rule, because that is where a real threat is coming, and coming sooner and quicker than we know. Thank you.
She didn't mention you by name, did she? Okay, all right. Well, if you want to respond, I have to also give her a time to respond as well. You want to keep moving? Okay. Well, Ms. Gray, let's hang out there a little bit. There's another question here that says, I know you are primarily focused on statehood, but how can we get equitable funding and treatment of National Park Service parks and properties east of the river? Can you do something about that? You can take that question as well.
Thank you for that question. Funding for federal parks does not come under the U.S. Rep. It does, however, come under our Congresswoman. That is federal funding. And I do want you to know, I do live in Ward 4, but trust me, the federal parks all across this city need to be worked on and need to be cleaned up, grass cut, dead limbs picked up. It's all across the city. It's not just in Ward 8.
Mr. Woliwa.
Now, why I agree that there's certain things that are outside the scope of this role, it's not an excuse to not do anything. So when people reach out to me and say, we need to clean Shepherd's Park, I reach out to the delegate's office, but I don't just say, I'm only the statehood guy. When we live in Ward 8, we see so many leaders occupy different hats, whether it's President Presswood, whether it's Stuart Anderson, whether it's Wanda Lockridge, whether it's Regina Pixley. We can't just say, this is my job, and that's where it ends. We have to step up, and that's what I've been able to do, even since being an ANC commissioner in Ward 8.
Thank you for that. So let's stay with you, Mr. Ololiwa. What role does the shadow rep have in the fight for DC statehood? What specific things could you, as the shadow rep, do to expedite DC becoming a state?
That's a great question. In this role, it's all about advocacy. As a former ANC commissioner, we understand that there's limits to what we can do. But we have a platform to make things happen. In this office, we were able to go to West Virginia and knock on doors for faces that didn't look like ours in this room. We were able to talk to people that didn't vote like us, and we made things happen. With the support of not only this office, but other Congress members, other activist groups, we've been able to really push the needle, appearing in dozens of publications. We were able to collaborate with the Stonewall Democrats to have a virtual equality panel where we took on policies that affect people outside of this district. And the reason why that's important is because once people know the voices and the things that we stand for, they're going to say there's an ally in DC, and they're going to start supporting the things that we do over here. So while there's limits in our role, we maximize this platform and make things happen.
Thank you, Ms. Gray.
Could you repeat that question?
Yes. What role does the shadow rep have in the fight for statehood? What specific things could the shadow rep do to expedite DC becoming a state?
The U.S. reps has a lot of flexibility in terms of what it can do. And I'm very proud to say that as vice chair, we've been taking on some of those responsibilities for the last 3 years. The best thing that I can tell you, and the thing I'm most proud of, is that in all 50 states across this great country, we have been able to introduce a resolution and got a vote by every state party in the country to support statehood. That then allows us to take our work to another level, to state legislators and state delegates, which also are leaders in state parties. And I do believe that we put the work in that helped us to get to winning the House and only losing statehood by 4 votes in the Senate. I think we really did the work.
Thank you. Mr. Olowa, in order to achieve statehood, we have to convince Republicans to get back on board the statehood train. Explain how you will do that.
That's a great question, and it falls under the wheelhouse of reaching across the aisle. There are not enough Democrats in the Senate to pass this bill without changing the filibuster. You have to reach over to people who don't vote like you and find reasons that you all can come to a similar perspective. For example, I was talking to someone who lived in Wyoming, and they were complaining about lack of control of the Yellowstone Park. When we take our issues of lack of self-autonomy and contribute to the other side, then there's commonality. Once we get the votes in Congress, Democrat side and some Republican side, they're gonna be bills that are gonna walk a little bit closer to equality. But I didn't we deserve full statehood because these itty bitty bills are gonna actually take back our eventual fight. Now, in terms of reaching across the aisle and getting Republican support, that's what I've done. I've appeared on conservative radio stations, I've talked directly to voters at their doors, and I made sure that they understand what we stand for in DC.
Ms. Gray, same question. In order to achieve statehood, how we have to convince Republicans to get back on board. So how will you do that?
I do think that we need to reach across the board to talk to Republicans. It's not that they don't know better, they just won't do better. But the other thing that we need to do when we reach out to Republican supporters, we need to let them know that when they don't talk to their constituents about what they're going to do in DC, they talk to their constituents about what they're going to do to them or for them from the states in which they come. It is only when they come to DC that they talk about what they're going to subject us to. So I think it is upon us to let them know that your representatives who are here to render harm to us are derelict in their duties to you because they promised you new schools and infrastructure and better jobs and better housing, but they're not doing that when they get here.
Ms. Gray, let's hang out with you here. So again, I know that these roles, and we've explained and we've heard that these roles are largely ceremonial activism roles to get DC statehood, but there are questions coming in about other issues. And so I think it would be good to hear some of your thoughts on this. Actually, one is for you, Ms. Gray. What have you done in the political field? I think I asked that question the right way. If I didn't, if the person who asked it, okay. No, that's what it says, though. Go ahead. Because I didn't get the right. Oh, okay. Go ahead and ask your question. I'll repeat it.
Smith. And my question is, what have you done in the community? I heard you have an extensive political career. I've heard all your accolades, but you mentioned nothing, as the doctor had mentioned, what you did in the community.
Okay. Thank you for that. So the question for our viewing audience was directed to Ms. Gray that asked, what have you done in the community outside of the politics stuff? Okay, there we go.
I'm very active in my community. For the past 25 years, I've been working in my community on the bike trail, and I'm very happy to say that the alignment we've been working for was approved by DDOT. The second thing that I've been doing, my view on affordable housing, has to do with co-op production. I happen to be the board of directors, the vice president of the board of directors for the Eastmont Cooperative, and it is probably one of the most successful cooperatives in this city. We've paid off our mortgage. Our senior citizens are able to live affordably and comfortably, and nobody pays $1,000 to this day, monthly.
Yes, Mr. Wolowa, you want to respond to that as well?
Yes, and I believe your question involves tangibles. You know, we can all talk about statehood, we can all talk about pie in the sky policies. But as an ANC commissioner, I helped drive out a slumlord that was trying to push out Congress Heights Tenant Association. I'm working with the Brookland Manor Tenant Association in Ward 5 to do the same thing. I brought Narcan distributed in Ward 5 a week after 10 people died from fentanyl-laced drugs. These are tangibles. It may not be in the description of representative, but as elected official, it's my job to make sure that the places I live and the city I call home is better with me there than before me.
Thank you. Let's hang out with you, Mr. Wolowa. Name one thing, one really big thing you've done for the fight for DC statehood.
Well, that's a challenging question. You know, being in Ward 8, I knock on doors, and the last thing people want to hear is an elected official taking sole credit for group work. But if you want to go that question, my collaborations with other organizations to get the DC statehood bill introduced in the House of Delegates in West Virginia is a big deal. Right now, we have a senator in West Virginia that votes or says he's a Democrat, but has been getting in the way of a lot of legislation, not just statehood, but also other progressive issues that people, not only in DC, but in West Virginia care about. Whether you're in Anacostia or the Appalachians, you care about lead-free water. Whether you live in Northeast DC or in Sunnyside, Chicago, you care about gentrification. And I've been able to step up, make collaborations based off of similar issues, and make sure we carry our voice on a national stage, even if we don't have a vote on it.
Ms. Gray, same question.
Repeat that, please.
Name the one thing you've done in the fight for DC statehood.
I've done several things in the fight for DC.
Just one?
Just one? Okay, I'd like to acknowledge and thank everyone who participated with us. I worked with the planners of the March on Washington that we had last August, and we organized and had a grand showing of our groups within the DC Democratic State Committee, which represents every constituency, and I'm extremely proud of the turnout.
All right, great, thank you. All right, here's the next question, and actually this is a good one. So if we can't achieve DC statehood, will you support retrocession back to Maryland so that we can finally have taxation without representation? Oh, actually, no, I'm sorry. Taxation with representation. I'm so used to the slogan. So that we can finally have taxation with representation. Let's start with you, Mr. Wolowa.
Simple answer is no. Maryland doesn't want DC. DC don't want to be part of Maryland. It doesn't work politically. It doesn't work economically. It doesn't work culturally. My role is to make sure that not only DC becomes a state, but those fighting for DC statehood stay in DC once become a state. That means driving out some lords. That means making sure people are healthy. That makes sure that our voice is at the table on national legislation, even if we don't have a vote.
Ms. Gray, would you support retrocession?
I would not support that. Okay. Maryland does not want us. DC does not want us. We have been fighting for statehood for decades. There is not a reason for us to give it up. There will never be a reason for us to give up our fight for statehood.
Mm-hmm. Now, doesn't Maryland want us, though, in some way? Just a rhetorical question. It's untimed. But, I mean, every time I turn around, folks are moving to Maryland, so I'm just saying. Anyway, well, there's that. All right, here's another question sort of hanging out in that same space, and I'm going to actually come to you, Ms. Gray. Since they treat us like a territory, will you support removing us from paying federal taxes?
No, I would not, because that would then give them an excuse to continue denying us statehood.
Okay, Mr. Wolowa, do you support us stop paying federal taxes?
So that's a great question. I know in the past, our delegate Eleanor Holmes Norton supported it. I know last time around I did as well. But one thing I realized is that we're not taxes away from becoming a state. You know, the statehood affects so many different things, like the quality of our roads. It affects the laws that we're able to pass. It affects all different aspects of life in DC. That the really big push forward is equality, and not just what affects our wallets. Also, we don't want DC to become a tax haven. We don't want to see folks who don't vote like us, who don't represent our culture, come in to save a couple of dollars. We want to make sure that DC residents are able to stay in DC, and then once we become a state, become the first residents of the District of Columbia, or otherwise the Douglas Commonwealth.
Douglas Commonwealth, yeah, that's right. I haven't heard that in a minute. Okay. Here's another question. Besides statehood, do you have other priorities, other legislative priorities and initiatives? And I want to follow up. I got a question from someone who want you to think bigger about all 8 wards as well, not just, I guess, just Ward 8, even though I take offense to that. They were here at the Ward 8 Democrats Forum, but they do want, the question was, you know, let's look broadly about all 8 wards. And so, ma'am, you have, okay, but let me have the question, let me have them answer the question, and then if you have another one, we'll try to get to that, okay? We're kind of tight on time. Let's start with Linda Gray. No. The question is, besides statehood, do you have other legislative priorities or initiatives?
One of the initiatives that is close to my heart, and I'll say it again, is housing. Everyone deserves decent housing. And I know that we are a city where there is lots of development, but what I don't see is home ownership. Those opportunities are not coming as they should. And that was what I was trying to explain before, that there is a model out there where tenants can convert properties and so that they have a vested interest and they won't be priced out and they won't be taxed out and they can call DC home for as long as they want to call DC home. Age in their properties, age comfortably, and enjoy all of the city services that we all want to have, but to have a safe home is a priority for me.
Thank you. Mr. Woliwa.
So oftentimes we hear about in the Ward 8 forum talking about what's going on in the rest of the city. It's similar to when people say Black Lives Matter and we hear All Lives Matter. When it comes to other areas, they're able to be specified. When it comes to our area, we have to share our resources and our conversation. Now, when it comes to federal legislation, we must pass the Equality Act. Make sure that we are protecting members of the LGBTQ+ community. We must pass the PRO Act to protect unions. We have to pass all these legislations because what we see is we have the same opponents for racial justice, same opponents for statehood, same opponent for environmental justice. And this office are attacking each and every issue in different ways.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Let's stay with you, Mr. Woliwa. Will we have statehood in our lifetime?
Yes. We passed the House of Representatives for the second time in history, and we have more co-sponsors in the Senate. We have about 46. We also have a president who also supports DC statehood. But this is nothing new. In 2008 and 2009, there was actually a supermajority that could have accomplished DC statehood, but they weren't ready to take that on. With the efforts in this office, with the efforts from the community, we are getting ourselves out there. This pandemic has made this world a much smaller place. We can activate not only physically, but also virtually to people who have never seen us, who have never met us. And it's opportunities for us to really raise ourselves to the mantle and make sure DC becomes a state in our lifetime. My opinion, I believe we're about 5 to 10 years away if we do everything right.
Mr. Gray, Mrs. Gray.
I'm very hopeful that we will have statehood in our lifetime, but here's the thing. Because we were 4 votes shy in the Senate, we don't pick up where we left off. We're back to ground zero, which means we have to have another hearing in Congress, another vote in the Senate, and we're going to have a new Congress. If the Democrats lose the House of Representatives, we start all over again, but it's a fight that we cannot give up.
And of course, that ties into the question that came up earlier about working across the aisle. All right, let's go with this question. Do you support DC residents rising up in a January 6th style seizure of the U.S. Capitol until we get statehood? Let's start with you, Ms. Gray. Say again. No. Did you hear the question? Sure. Ms. Gray, we'll start with you and then we'll move to Mr. Awolowo. Do you support DC residents rising up in a January 6th style seizure of the U.S. Capitol until we get statehood?
No, I do not. I do not support that at all. January the 6th was a day that I call pure savagery, and we are much, much better than that. I have absolutely no problem with peaceful protests. As a matter of fact, I would support that, and I think it's coming anyway. But to do what happened January the 6th, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Awolowo, same question. I'll just put a preface of what we've been doing. Haven't quite gotten it yet. I think that's the spirit of the question. Would you support us going hard in the paint?
You know what's interesting? Everyone remembers the insurrection date was January 6th. But what day did we just recently pass HR 51? Anybody know in the audience? Exactly. Now, the reason why I don't support us doing it, because we know damn well if it was us going up into the Capitol versus the people who did it originally, the results would have been different. With that said, we have to push harder. We have to push our friends that live in other states to contact their representatives. Because if people from other states that don't look like us support things for people that do look like us, that's how you change things. So we have to reach out greater to the LGBTQ plus community. We have to reach out to the environmentalists. We have to reach out to every single person who's fighting for progressive changes. Because once DC becomes a state, we have 3 electors who will vote for those same things that they support. So DC statehood is not a standalone issue. It is environmental justice. It is racial justice. It is health care equality. It is wealth equality. Because these are the things that we stand for here in the district.
Thank you for that. So there was a young lady in the audience who wanted to ask her question. She said we didn't quite ask it right. So tell me your name.
My name is Dorothy Davis.
All right, and what's your question?
My question is to Ms. Gray. This is the first time I've ever seen you. So you were saying that you work in your neighborhood, but y'all got to realize when y'all are here running for office, you got to work in all 8 if you're supposed to work in all 8, not just yours. And we never seen you. So this is my first time seeing you, and I'll be out here. I'll be out here. So Ms. Gray, you got to come a little better than that about your ward.
So is it a comment or a question? Do you have a question?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both.
So let's pull a question out of that and say that I guess and we'll start with Ms. Gray. I'm sorry, streaming team. I'm sorry, I'm kind of moving around. Let's start with Ms. Gray about, what's your, I guess, approach to doing an all 8 ward strategy, and then we'll ask the same question of Mr. Awolowo.
First of all, I don't know that I haven't done an all 8 ward. I'm sure that there are plenty of people in Ward 8 that I have never met. There are plenty of people in my own ward I haven't met because it's forever changing. But I have been in Ward 8. As a matter of fact, I taught in Ward 8. I taught at Ballou. So I know that I've been here. I'm sorry I haven't been here enough to make you comfortable. But as your U.S. rep, you most certainly will see me. Well, then you really should have seen me. I'm in Ward 5 a lot.
Oh. Hey, I grew up in Ward 5. Ward 5 is my ancestral home. But thank you. We can't hear you because you don't have a mic. Thank you. Well, not on the people live. That's all we're saying. Okay. All right, I got you. Thank you so much. And I grew up in 5, and that's a spirit we bring from Ward 5 as well, just like Ward 8. All right, so let's go with you, Mr. Awolowo. As far as just an all 8 ward strategy, speak on that.
So there's tons of issues in all wards, especially when it comes to environmental justice. I've been proud to collaborate with you from Ward 1 through Ward 8. But I want to talk about another issue. It is very important to have at-large elected officials east of the river, folks who are by those schools, so folks who are by the roads, because you see things and people tell you things that they can't tell you if you're not there. There are roads that are paved better. There are speed bumps that are done. There are traffic lights that are fixed because it's not just our council member when it comes to election politics. I said that it's very important to have other elected officials from east of the river because it's not just Trout White who can get things done. How many of us have gone to a council member meeting? Maybe not a lot of us, because we are not only east of the river, but we're east of the 95. Depending on the time, it may take you an hour to get there. It's not just politics, it's also healthcare. If you get shot, if you're pregnant, your water breaks, let's hope it's at 8 o'clock at night, not 8 o'clock in the morning. This is what's important about having at-large elected officials all across the city, not just in the selected parts of the Northwest.
Thank you. As we are beginning to wrap up here, let's go to our final question here, which is, do you have a question for your opponent? And let's ask that question of Ms. Gray.
If I have a question at all, it probably would be, why were you not a part of our initiative to push an agenda across the country as we did with every Democratic Party and got a vote to support statehood? Why were you not a part of that resolution with us?
That's a great question, and I can keep it very simple. As someone who's not a member of the DC Statehood Committee, I wasn't invited. Now, being an elected official as well as being a pharmacist, time can be limited, but I also work with organizations that reach out to me. That's why I was able to reach out to DC Voters for Animals for environmental justice. That's why I work with Ward 8 Woods as we clean up Shepherd Park. That's why I work with elected officials from Ward 1 through Ward 8 to get things done. When I wake up in the morning, I think about the very people in this room, how I could do a better job for you guys. If it means I miss a photo op, if it means I'm not in a nice picture, if it means that I have fewer friends with those in power, I will take that every single time because I serve you all, not for Congress people who want to take a nice picture who don't represent us. I serve you all.
Well, do you have a question for Ms. Gray?
Yes, absolutely. Typically, when someone runs for office and challenges an incumbent, there's criticism about their record. There's things that they say, maybe this person isn't doing well, and maybe there's opportunities for someone to say they improve. This is my third or fourth debate. I haven't heard any comment about my record. I haven't heard anyone disprove the fact that we raised the bar here. And I've heard things that don't matter, like your gender, like where you were born, not where you serve. So my question to my friend here is, why are you running?
That's my entire closing statement. I am running, number one, because I'm qualified. I'm running because I am a Washingtonian who cares deeply about her city, our city. I am running because there are certain things that I know in terms of disparities that, and if I want to just make it relative to Ward 8, in terms of racial justice issues, in the absence of statehood, DC is subject to federal supervision, which has often put health issues in the hands of non-resident members of Congress, enabling them to implement harmful health policies and denying funds, such as the CARE Act. I'm running because how many people understand that our rollout to the vaccine program was cut short because Congress didn't give us a dime from the CARES Act, and we had to dig deep into our supplemental funds. And it wasn't until we turned the White House blue that we were reimbursed $765 million to have a vaccine program, and now there is a COVID center in every ward. So I'm running probably on some of the same issues that you say you run on, but my record speaks for itself. I have my entire adult life in community service and education as a professional. Thank you.
Thank you. So let's actually hang out there. You mentioned as part of your closing statement. Why don't you go ahead and offer that up at this time? You have 1 minute.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm asking you for your vote because in my lifetime, I have known not being able to vote for the President of the United States to our last congressional hearing when statehood was passed by the House but failed in the Senate by 4 votes. We are back to ground zero and must continue the fight for statehood. I ask for your vote because I'm a proven leader and because democracy is on the ballot. I ask for your vote because home rule is being threatened if Democrats should lose the House of Representatives. I ask for your vote to protect marriage equality and LGBTQ rights. I ask for your vote to fight for women's rights and women's reproductive health choices. I ask for your vote because we've not had a woman in the U.S. as a U.S. representative since 1999. I ask for your vote because I am a 5th-generation Washingtonian and I am committed to the Washington-Douglas Commonwealth, 51st state.
Thank you. Mr. Owolowo, you have a 1-minute closing.
First of all, I want to thank the Ward 8 Democrats for putting this forum together. We were able to do these things even during the pandemic, and we're doing it now as we go beyond the pandemic. My story doesn't begin in Washington, D.C. My parents were born in Nigeria. I was born and raised in the United States, but I became a man in Ward 8, Southeast Washington, D.C. Right? I was an ANC commissioner following the support of Troy Presswood, watching what he did, watching what Trayvon's doing. I learned I'm going to stand on the shoulders of everybody in this room. DC statehood is a critical issue that we can tackle together. And with your previous support, and more importantly, your partnership, we not only got closer to statehood, but we brought tangible results to Southeast Washington, D.C. Anybody can get up here and say the right things. Everybody over here can speak strongly. But remember, whose number do you have? Who have you seen before? Who do you see outside cleaning up Shepherd's Park? Who do you see out there working with a mom and pop shop like Marty's Food to deliver to Afghan refugees in the DC area when nobody else was doing it? Vote for Oya because it votes for yourself.
Please, will you help me thank the candidates for being here today and for their indulgence of these questions. We do appreciate that. And again, if your question didn't get asked, you can continue to interact with these candidates. You can Google them. Those of you who are here in the fellowship hall, obviously you can interact with them here. But those of you who are watching virtually, you can interact with them in their online space on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever they are, website. Okay, thank them once again. Thank you both. Appreciate it. All right. Online. Again, you will be able to vote in these 40 vote centers across the district during early vote period that runs June 10th through June 19th. And 90 vote centers will be open on Election Day, Tuesday, June 21st. In addition to those 40 vote centers, 90 vote centers will be open on Election Day, and 55 drop boxes will be open all across the city. You can vote at any of those locations. Take a look at these slides up here. You'll see the vote locations in Ward 8. Vote in those locations if you want to stay in the ward, but to be clear, you can vote anywhere in the city.